I'd rather 4 days, probably like 30 miles.
Let me call the Berkeley City Planning Commission to order for its regular meeting of Tuesday, July the 25th, 2017. Would you all rise for the pledge to the flag? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could I have a roll call, Mr. Baumgarten?
My pleasure, Mr. Chair. Bruckler,
Present.
Kapelansky,
Here.
Murad,
Here.
Richardson,
Here.
Shadle,
Here.
D. Smith,
Here.
M. Smith,
Here.
Tangari,
Here.
Barnett.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a full slate.
At this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Murad. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tangari. Any discussion on the agenda this evening? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call, please.
Okay. Bruckler,
Yes.
Kapelansky,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
D. Smith,
Yes.
M. Smith,
Yes.
Tangari,
Yes.
Barnett.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the June 27th, 2017 meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Dean Smith. Is there
Support.
Support by Commissioner Richardson. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I guess we'll take a roll call vote.
All right. Kapelansky,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
D. Smith,
Yes.
M. Smith,
Yes.
Tangari,
Yes.
Barnett,
Yes.
Bruckler.
Yes.
Okay.
Communications. Did we receive any communications?
You have communications included in your packet, handed out to you at the meeting because it came late in the day yesterday. Is a request from the applicant for items 3, 4, and 5 to postpone discussion on that matter, pending some additional items that they need to get to this body for a full and robust discussion.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'll entertain citizens' comments. Any citizen who would care to address the Planning Commission on any topic not on the agenda this evening may do so at this time.
I can discuss what I want to.
Anything that's not on the agenda.
Thank you. I've anguished over this for some time. I want everybody to know
I'm
this.
sorry, can you give us your name, please?
Name, please.
My name is Jim Cox. I live on Oxford. I've been up here a couple of times and I've anguished over what I'm doing tonight for some time. I worked for the city for 35 years. I love this place. I love my community. I love my home. And I don't like standing up and questioning my leaders. But the last several meetings we've had, I've spoke up about conflict of interest.
Mr. Cox, I'm sorry. I really can't hear you very well. Could you
All right.
speak up?
I have spoke up a couple of times about the conflict of interest that is going on here. You, sir, volunteered to recuse yourself if somebody asked you to. I did. I don't know what's going on with that. I haven't heard. What does it take? Does it take a citizen, another member, a council? What does it take to get members to recuse themselves? I say yes out of love for my community. And I got a little energized tonight when I read this letter from this man here who calls us rogues of the community that you can't control. Hope he's here. I hope he's listening. I'd like to talk to him and Mr. Adler. This country was founded on roguism. People that stood up for what they believed in. And if he thinks that's denying me my constitutional rights, I'd like to meet him. Because that's what this country in the city is all about. I'm asking each and every one of you tonight, if you're a parishioner of the church, or if you have met or contact with the developer, which Mr. Barnett, you have volunteered that you did also. There's many questions I have about that meeting and how it was set up and when. I'm not going to get into it right now, but I'm asking each and every one of you tonight, not tomorrow night, not next week or nothing, but to recuse yourself from the planning, from this project that's going on. There's too much conflict of interest. I hate doing this. I don't like it. But in the interest of my neighborhood, my property, I'm asking you to. I'm asking you to stand up and the Berkley motto, we care. And answer to Mr. Adler and his attorney. I'll leave him and everybody else with this quote from Thomas Paine. We need times like this to try men's souls. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yes. My name is Donnie Dykes. I live at 37.
Stand up to them. We can talk, speak into the microphone, so.
My name is Donnie Dykes. I live at 3715 Gardner Avenue, Berkley, Michigan. I don't appreciate being called a rogue. I've been called a lot of things, but I've never been called a rogue. You can tell that attorney, because I don't know where he lives. If I did, I would go tell him myself. But I'm not a rogue. And when they build those apartments and they blow every sewer system we got out, it's going to cost us a lot of money and a lot more millages. That's all. I've been in construction all my life, so I do know what I'm talking about. You can sit there and get your people's opinions and have them come in and tell you, oh yeah, our sewer system will hold it. It won't. They already flood on that end of town down there. My nephew lives down there. When it rains, they flood. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? All right, hearing no other comments this evening, we'll move on to the regular agenda. Mr. Baumgarten?
Yes, sir. Item 1, elections, matter of electing a chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary of the Planning Commission.
Okay. I have decided that I'm going to step down as the chair of the Planning Commission. I've spent a number of years in this task, and things have been extremely interesting here the last couple of years, and I have decided to step aside as the chair. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to look at a new chair.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Dean Smith.
you've thought this through?
I thought this through.
Okay, I'm disappointed, but I understand, and your reference to interesting is probably the most appropriate printable word that we could have. Martin Smith, you are currently vice chair.
Yes, I am.
Do you have interest, energy, and desire to move up to the chairman position?
Well, I didn't consider this for a very long time for tonight. I'm saddened that you've made that decision. I've been the vice chair for a long time, and doing so, I'm kind of kept in the loop. Not 100%, but I'm kept in the loop should I have to fill in for the chairman. I've had a few times. With my duties and responsibilities in my office, I have to respectfully decline. I cannot put in that extra time required in all the meetings and discussions that the chair position requires with staff, the city manager, and the city council. I appreciate that, but I just can't put in the time for that. So I will decline that position. Sorry.
Another disappointment. Last couple of years here have been very interesting. And we've got some new members, we've got some maybe seasoned members. One of the commissioners that I've noticed has a kind of a streak of independence, and sometimes annoying, but always good. Michelle Buckler. Would you be interested in taking a nomination and a shot at the chair position?
I could do that.
You could do that. Does that mean yes?
Yes, that means yes. I
Okay.
would do that. That would
Now,
it could be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
fun.
And I'm happy to step up to help my community, most importantly.
That's pretty neat. Now, as vice chair, Martin Smith, are you interested in continuing on as vice chair?
I like the position as vice chair, but you know, we're seeing what's happening here suddenly, very suddenly. Should Ms. Buckler become the chairman? She's coming into it cold.
Chair.
There's a lot of responsibilities. I talked a little while ago.
My husband's gonna kill me.
Like I said, I like being the vice chair. Current Mr. Chairman, would you be interested in being the vice chair and help Ms. Buckler out in the in all her duties? You have the experience, obviously, and there's going to be quite a transition period. And I think you could help her more than I could.
We might take both of you.
Would you be in agreement if I did?
Love that,
If
David.
I took
Your
that on?
Your mentorship would be a tremendous asset in this.
I must warn you,
Right.
this transition.
Mr. Barnett, the pay's not real good, so.
I know the pay, I know. I saw it as the chair, so. The pay isn't great either for the chair,
It's not
but
paid.
yes, I'll consider it, yes.
Fund my shoe collection. I think that'd be great.
Now,
Now, oh,
there's one other vacancy, you know.
yes, I was going to try to
Okay.
get to that.
Go ahead.
My notes are extensive. I have
All right, go
2
ahead.
words written so far. Mr. Richardson,
Yes, sir.
would you be interested in continuing on in your role?
As secretary, we should clarify, secretary.
I think with Mr. Baumgarten's assistant, I can probably continue effectively in that role. So yeah, I'm willing to remain as the secretary.
Okay, now, this is where I need probably Mr. Baumgarten's help in making a motion. Are we looking at 3 motions, or can 1 motion suffice?
One, nominating a single slate would suffice.
Okay. So I would, in order to get the discussion started, I would make a motion to nominate Michelle Buckler as chair of the Planning Commission, David Barnett as vice chair of the Planning Commission, and Mr. Mark Richardson as secretary.
Is there a second to the motion?
Support.
Seconded by Jim Murray. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, is there anybody else that would be interested in the position?
That's the question, yeah.
That's
Right,
the question.
In any of those positions, actually. And I think having Mr. Barnett as the vice chair is a given. So is there anybody else interested in the chair position outside of Ms. Buckler?
Given my travel commitments and occasional work, I have no time or energy to fill that role.
And I'd have to say the same for myself. My work commitment wouldn't allow me to be pulled away quite often.
Should we poll the group?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask Michelle a question. You have missed a few meetings in the past. Has your situation changed now, and you believe you would be in the chair seat most of the time?
I would be in the chair seat most of the time. I got married on one of those occasions, and I had
What
a
excuse is that?
father-in-law funeral on another occasion. And so yes, I think I can be in the chair most of the time.
That's good enough for me.
I'll move my travel schedule around Tuesdays, the fourth Tuesday. I'm not getting married again. Chris, I'm not getting married again. So.
Any other discussions?
Just to make him happy.
All right, Mr. Baumgarten, let's call the roll, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Kurt Height, 3525 Robina. You came tonight and you said you decided you weren't going to be chairman anymore, but I'm just curious what stepping down to co-chairman would be, what do you think that would solve? Because I feel that, and I'm not speaking for anybody else that feels like there was other things that happened. I was a little bit disappointed in the last meeting, and I feel like I've, done my shares as letting any other past issues. I let them go and didn't harbor on them. But last meeting you did not allow me to speak when it was a time for citizens' comment on an agenda item, and that was just one of the many things that every time I think you turn the corner, you're right back to treating residents in an inappropriate way. And so now when I hear they're saying that you do have experience, and I don't deny you that, but now they're saying that you'd be a good co-chair. To me, I feel like, what does that solve? Why step down if you feel that you can operate as a co-chair? To me, I feel that there either should be a change completely or not, because to me, I didn't deserve that. None of the residents deserve how you treated them last meeting. And to me, I think there should have been a stronger issue or a statement issued from the council in regards to how you treated the residents at the last meeting, and cumulatively how you treated them for the past year. And I've been pretty fair. Now, every time I've been willing to let it go. If and you would be a new Barnett. You would treat people differently for like 1 or 2 meetings. Then all of a sudden something would come up, some rocky, some situation, and if they didn't agree with you, you shut them down. You don't give the same allowances to the residents that you do different businesses that seem to be aligned with what you want to do. And as a matter of fact, you even treat a specific business different than you treat a current one that's looking for a PUD agreement. You would never allow Vincetta's Garage to include parking that doesn't exist in their plan.
Could I
But yet for the PUD, you have not said anything about them including, publicly, about them including parking that doesn't even exist in what's on display at City Hall. And I just feel that as a chairperson, you should be held to a higher standard. As a resident, I may not know all those things, but you should know the ins and outs. You should treat businesses the same, regardless of whatever happened in the past, and you should treat residents the same as good, if not better, than what you treat the businesses.
I try very hard to treat everybody alike, and I've been faulted for not gaveling sooner on some items when residents get up, and I've let them go on. Regarding Vincetta Garage never came before the Planning Commission in the very beginning. We never, ever
But that's not their fault.
right
I'm
now
saying
they
that
have
when
a
they came
parking-
forward, if they would have
now they
stepped up and
have
said,
a-
here's our parking plan, the business next to us owns a lot, they're gonna turn it into a lot. If they were to count those parking spots as part of their parking, you guys would have been all over them. But yet, nobody said anything to the PUD application regarding to the fact that the church never had a site plan approved, didn't have really any legit plans yet of building a lot. That came a month later. And had Vincetta Garage tried to do the same thing, you guys would have really been on them. And that's all I'm bringing up when it comes to that, because I feel that you should have held them to the same standard that you would have held Vincetta Garage, because regardless of how Vincetta Garage got approved, the here and now means that you have to deal with them in a professional manner. And I felt the way you dealt with them the last 2 meetings, I didn't feel that that was appropriate.
The church
No, this,
has not brought forth all of the documentation that's
right, but the
required.
PUD agreement lists the church as the lot existing. They've listed it like that for 2 months, and not one person has told them to correct it. And there's other issues with that, with the whole application that is inaccurate. I don't understand how it's being displayed at City Hall when there's, Mr. Richardson pointed out that even though they claim they're close, just over the 35% for coverage, they're like closer to 54%, because nobody fact-checked any of the stats that are on the papers. You know, so there's all these things with the PUD application that are just don't add up. So, had Vincent Garage tried to do the same thing, is all I'm saying, that you would have been all over it. But the PUD at PUD, you got nobody's fact-checking anything. It's just like, whatever, it looks good.
Where I have to tell you that the plan unit development is not anywhere near ready for this council, for this board, or even the city council to begin to decide whether it's good or bad. If I had to vote on it tonight, I would probably vote against the whole thing, because we don't have enough and all of the information.
Right, I just feel that, like I said, that you should have said something to them regarding the accuracy, and nobody's done that. It's kind of like you do things behind the scene, but to me, I think publicly they should be questioned on the accuracy of their paperwork.
We have been asking for information at every meeting, every single
Right,
meeting.
but the misinformation is being displayed at City Hall while we're speaking, you know, for 2 months. The regular public that comes in here sees it, they look and say, oh, it looks like they got enough parking because the church has plenty to give away, which they don't. It looks like they don't cover too much of the property. It's misleading the regular person that comes in, and where if they were seeing the actual figures, they might be upset. They may actually come into the meetings and talk against it because they would realize how bad of a deal this PUD agreement is. But so they're being allowed to display this misinformation at City Hall is my point. And Vincent Garage would not have been allowed to do that.
I'm not aware, Mr. Bunker.
I can certainly address at least a part of this. The application materials are available upon request, but they are generated by the applicant. So they are presented without commentary. The commentary happens in the open and public meeting. Likewise with Vincent Garage, there were being delicate, any misrepresentations that they made concerning how much parking that they have, or likewise would have been on display at any point. We have a longer track record with an approved business that is Vincetta, so we know a little bit more about the actual state of their parking, but what is on display now is simply application materials, by no means set in stone. And so the commission, as the chair indicated, has a lot more information and a lot more accuracy is needed for them to be anything more than just application materials, not a plan per se.
Right.
And the PUD agreement itself is absolutely in draft form until approved by the city council. So that draft does not move forward. It indicates sort of the goals of the project, but nobody should read the PUD agreement at this point in time and say this is an actual representation of the way things are, given that no approvals have been offered.
No, I know, but my saying is that the regular person who comes into City Hall and looks at it, because we're told that, you know, if you have any question about it, you can come in and look at all the information. To me, the information being displayed should be fact-checked. It should be as accurate as possible based on what they're presenting, and it's not. And my question was, would you allow Vincent Garage to come in here and say, you know, I got 18 other parking spots that are coming in this lot next door owned by the other business. You know, eventually that guy said he's going to turn it into a lot, right? But you would not let him count that as parking because there's not been a site plan approved. There's not been any movement on that. Whereas the PUD application is allowed to say that they got 100 spots parking that they don't have, that the church is just now working on paperwork to get it approved. Is all I'm saying. You didn't hold them to the same standards, and you didn't call them out on it either. He stood up here and said, yeah, they got 240 parking spots, and they don't. Whatever number he's saying. You did not hold him to the same accountability as you would have been set a garage. And my concern is, if you can't do that as a chairperson, do you think you're going to be able to operate as a co-chair now? Because I feel that there's been issues for the past year that you can't get past. Every time we think that Barnett is different, every time he's been better, every time he's treated people a lot decent than you did the previous meeting, you do okay for a couple meetings, and all of a sudden you're right back to you're being rude to residents. And that's not right. And to me, I've been waiting for somebody to make an official statement on it. I think I've been pretty fair. It's been 2 months. And you were pretty rude to me the last meeting. You did not allow me to talk. It was an agenda item. You've had the same issue with previous residents when they try to talk and they said, well, it's an agenda item, and you were like, okay, you give in. That shouldn't be an issue. You've been doing this for a long time.
If there's an agenda item and people want to speak to it, I have allowed people to speak.
I was sitting right in the back row. I got stand up and you said, no, you have to wait till the open meeting.
We had, yes, that was
No, but I was talking about the agenda item that was on this, to be
the
discussed.
agenda item because we were going to have a public hearing and
But it wasn't regards to that, it was a different issue. I even had to say my statements, is all I'm saying.
Sorry.
That was pretty rude, you know?
sorry then, because I assumed that you were getting into the
Okay,
public
but so
hearing.
you're talking about stepping down as chair. Do you
Sorry.
think now you can now operate as a co-chair now? And do
He's
it,
chair.
what's that?
He's a vice chair.
A vice chair. Do you think you can operate as a vice chair fairly? I mean, do you think now that you can sit over in Martin Smith's seat and then now, just now when you got something to say, but not be rude?
I can handle the job. I'm very confident in myself that I can handle the job as needed. Thank you.
Okay, so do you think you handled the meeting last month properly?
If I had to do two things, I would have not made any comments. I would have let everybody roll along. I interrupted two people at that meeting. Most likely, I should not have interrupted those people and let them go, and kept my comments till the end of the meeting and done it in the section I had comments. But I was very concerned with some of what people were saying about specific pieces of that project, and that was my only reason that I interrupted them, and I asked for them to consider it. And I told them why I interrupted them, and then I allowed them to continue.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Wendy Zabramski, Gardner Avenue, Berkeley. I too have felt very intimidated by when I make a comment with the looks I get from you, the comments. Certain people last time you argue with people. When it is time for a citizen to stand up here and talk to the Planning Commission, it is our turn to speak. You are not to interrupt. If ethics violations, if you check the ethics violations, you check the ethics code and you go back and look at that meeting, there had to have been at least half a dozen or more times that you were very inappropriate. I have very much concern about you, and I'm glad you are stepping down as chairperson. As being vice chairperson, I'm still very concerned. I am in the process right now of writing a letter to make a formal complaint of you and your ethics violation, which will also get sent to the Attorney General of Michigan.
Okay.
Any more discussion?
Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
All right. For the nominations as stated, Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
D. Smith,
Yes.
M. Smith,
Yes.
Tangari,
Yes.
Bruckler,
Yes.
Barnett,
Yes.
Kapelansky,
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Slate is nominated, or
Okay.
slate's affirmed.
At this point, let's take a 5-minute recess and let's shift gears.
Okay. You're staying there though, aren't you?
You take over.
It's flowing into
and was reviewing them for another board that I'm on, and I will have to now memorize them. So, our next item is the appointments of Planning Commission liaisons to the Downtown Development Authority, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, the City Council, and the Chamber of Commerce. So, currently, I believe our Downtown Development Authority liaison was Peg, right, or Dottie?
Dottie.
And, yeah, Peg and Dot, that's the, Dottie. Who was appointed to replace her, or was anybody appointed to replace her?
I don't believe anybody was appointed to replace her.
correct.
Okay, so that one's open. Parks and Rec, I was the representative for that. City Council,
That was.
that's David. And the Chamber of Commerce,
Me.
that is Tim. So, why don't we start with the easy one? We'll start backwards
Chamber,
forward.
I
Mr.
can-
Murad, would you
I
like
can
to continue?
in that role, and actually, in the agenda here, it's listed as the fourth Friday of every month at 8 a.m., and it's actually the second Wednesday at 5:15 p.m.
All right, we can fix that for the record. Mr. Baumgartner, did you get that?
I did, in fact, thank you.
Okay. And the City Council, David, I think it would probably be appropriate if that transitioned
Yeah, it usually goes to the chair.
to the chair,
Yes.
The vice chair is the backup.
and the vice chair is the
I will back
backup.
up you.
All
'Cause
right.
Marty used to have to go to council for me quite often.
All right. So, chair and vice chair. I think we can do that. We will need a representative for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, which meets the second Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. Do we have anybody interested in that?
Thursday's still a tough night for me.
Thursday's a tough night. Ms. Kapelinski?
I can't do it.
No?
Sorry.
Thursdays are always tough.
Thursdays are tough.
Thursdays are also difficult, yes.
I have a prior commitment at that
Yeah, nope,
particular
understood.
time.
I could try, but I can't promise
How about we
absolute
tag team
reliability.
it from the, how about we tag team it?
Okay,
So, every other month I can probably manage a Thursday.
all right. Parks and Rec.
Yep. Dean Smith. And that leaves the Downtown Development Authority. So a new opening.
As much as my calendar groans at the thought of having something else put on it, I can take that one.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Tangari. And that meets the second Wednesday of every month at 8 a.m.
Now,
They know me already, so.
Sorry.
Just want to correct that, it's 8:30 a.m.
8:30. Thank
Second
you for
Wednesday.
that.
So Joe, I hope you can still make that. We'll put you at the top of the agenda.
All right.
All right.
Ms. Buckler, did you say you did not want to be addressed as Madam Chair? I don't know how to.
Madam Chair is fine.
I don't know how to
Madam Chair is
address
fine.
Well, I like Madam Chair, so if I could call you that, that would
Thank
be,
you.
I'd be comfortable. I don't see the Environmental Committee on here.
And he's the environmental.
And you are on the Environmental Committee.
Yes, and I am the liaison to that, and I am more than willing to continue in that role.
All right. Thank you. Right. Okay, so the next item on the agenda,
The vote,
oh, we have to vote for the appointments?
we have to vote for those.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Oh,
Motion
Mr. Murat? The slate.
for the slate.
So I will go over the slate. The Environmental Committee, Mr. Richardson. The Downtown Development Authority will be Mr. Tangari. The Parks and Recreation will be split between myself and Dean Smith. The City Council will be myself as chair and David Barnett as vice chair to cover. And the Chamber of Commerce will be Mr. Murad. And that is the slate. So I have a motion from you to
I'll
cover that?
second it.
All right, Barnett seconds. Please call the roll.
Certainly. Dean Smith,
Yes.
Marty Smith,
Yes.
Joe Tangari,
Yes.
Bruckler,
Yes.
Kapelanski,
Yes.
Barnett,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Richardson,
yes.
and Shadle.
Yes.
Slate's affirmed.
Okay. So the next item on our agenda is Site Plan Review SP 06-17, the Archdiocese of Detroit of Our Lady of La Salette Church, 2599 Harvard, south side of Harvard, between Kipling and Coolidge, is requesting a site plan approval for a new parking lot in the office district. We have a letter dated July 24th, 2017, that came to the Planning Commission and to Mr. Baumgarten from CM Partners on behalf of Our Lady La Salette Parish that requests to remove the agenda items as scheduled for the Planning Commission meeting on July 25th. They would like it moved to the August Planning Commission meeting.
I'll make a motion to do that.
That would also cover SU 0217 and SP 07117,
We can
correct?
do all three, I guess.
We should
Or do we
address
have-
them individually.
Oh, just
Individually.
individually,
She wants
okay.
to take them
So
on.
we'll do SP 0617 to postpone.
There's a-
Second.
Support. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Rand made the motion. Ms. Kapelanski, you seconded?
Mr. Barnett.
Mr. Barnett made the motion. Mr. Murad made the second.
Multiple seconds there.
Multiple seconds.
All right, roll call. Marty Smith,
Yes.
Joe Tangari,
Yes.
Michelle Bruckler,
Yes.
Kristen Kapelanski,
Yes.
Tim Murad,
Yes.
Dave Barnett,
Yes.
Mark Richardson,
Yes.
Ann Shadle,
Yes.
Dean Smith,
Yes.
and we start with Marty? Marty Smith.
Yes,
Okay, good.
twice.
Extra good then. Extra postponed.
We're finding our
Well, that's an
rhythm.
ethics violation. Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
So our next agenda item is special land use, SU 0217, Archdiocese of Detroit, for Our Lady of La Salette, 2600 Harvard, north side of Harvard between Kipling and Coolidge, tax ID 2518-431-018 and 019, the west 84 feet of Lot 63, and the east 42 feet of Lot 62, excluding the north 93 feet of Denler Acres subdivision, is requesting special use approval for a parking lot for a place of worship in the R1D district. Again, we have a letter dated July 24th to the Planning Commission and the city requesting that this item be postponed and placed on the, or be removed, and this item being placed on the August Planning Commission meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to support?
Motion to.
Motion for Mr. Barnett.
Barnett.
Second
Second.
for Mr. Richardson. Call the roll, please.
Tangari,
Yes.
Bruckler,
Yes.
Kapelanski,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Barnett,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
D. Smith,
Yes.
M. Smith.
Yes.
Okay. Item number 5, site plan review, SP 07117, or 17, Archdiocese of Detroit for Our Lady of La Salette, 2600 Harvard, north side of Harvard between Kipling and Coolidge, is requesting site plan approval for a new parking lot in the R1D district. Again, a letter, July 24th, from CM Partners to the City Planning Commission and the city manager, requesting removal and requesting that it be placed on the August Planning Commission agenda.
Motion to postpone.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Kapelanski? Please call the vote.
All right, Murad,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
Barnett,
Yes.
D. Smith,
Yes.
M. Smith,
Yes.
Tangari,
Yes.
Bruckler,
Yes.
and Kapelanski.
Yes.
Wow, we moved through the agenda rapidly with me as chair.
I like this efficiency.
She's very efficient. She moves it right along.
Okay, item number 6, discussion, consideration of a zoning ordinance amendment related to generators to include a discussion of a draft ordinance. Mr. Baumgartner, would you like to discuss what we're going to discuss?
I would like to discuss the discussion, yes. Yes, Madam Chair. As you recall, the commission discussed this once before. They made comments to Ms. Vanson. Ms. Vanson took those comments as well as comments from the ZBA meeting in which 2 individual cases were addressed. She took both those comments, boiled them into a second draft ordinance that she places before you today through the Madam Chair. You have a copy of that, and then a little bit of information on, as noted within the documents, on notes and references made to other issues. So you've got that in your packet to discuss.
So, I open the discussion. Mr. Barnett.
I've had discussion, we've had discussion on this, and I don't see it in the draft ordinance. is dealing with side yard setbacks. And I was looking for it, and I didn't see anything about side yard setbacks. My own personal feeling is that the only time I would allow it as a side yard setback would be on a corner lot where you have the street, but I don't know what my fellow commissioners
Mr.
think
Chair?
about that.
Am I confused? Are we on the very middle of the second page that covers side yard setbacks?
Yeah.
We have a setback. It doesn't necessarily,
Right. it's on
oh,
the
it does
side.
say side yard. Wait,
No, it doesn't.
no, it merely just says from,
No,
Minimum
required
setbacks
separate from
the-
property lines, 3 feet from a building, a single-family detached resident, 3 feet, a neighbor's driveway.
Well,
or
these are
sidewalk.
setbacks. The required setback from property line is at least 3 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet, 2 feet.
Correct.
It looks pretty much the same as the one we have for air conditioners,
Well, this-
with the default position being they go behind the building.
And I think this ordinance is for exterior appliances, which is air
Yes. Mm-hmm.
conditioners.
and we're talking about generators and having the whole nine.
Right,
yeah.
and the
And I think we need to cover both of those.
yes, and I think they're, well, at least my recollection was, at the last meeting, we were going to treat them the same. You know, a properly installed standby generator makes the same, maybe less noise than a air conditioning unit.
Mhm.
So to treat them differently, am I confused?
Well, my issue was with the generator being in a side yard and adjacent to bedroom windows and things like that.
Right, well,
That's-
there's a venting, there's a code issue
Yeah,
that they
there's-
need to be, I think it's 3
Absolutely.
feet from an operable window.
Exactly.
But that, we don't need to cover in the
Yeah, that's a
setback.
code issue.
We can, that's just covered by the
And,
codes,
but
building
I,
code.
We have it in the restrictions section.
Yeah, it is in the restrictions.
noted in there.
but my feeling was that, you know, being in the middle of a block, do I want a generator sitting? And I'm not sure that in Berkeley, there may be some exceptional areas where you could pull it off, but I think in most of the city, it would be very difficult to get 3 feet and then put a generator park there, and because that's going to take up another 3 feet. With driveways and everything else, it's pretty tight.
Yes, understood. Currently, the boxes for a standby generator residential are pretty big.
Yeah.
But that's changing. They keep getting smaller
They're
and
making
smaller.
them smaller, yeah.
I think that if we have a setback and the unit fits, to me, it's really no different. And I'm one of the, 5 people in Berkeley without air conditioning?
I'm the other one.
Yes. There are so many air conditioning condensers located, in side yards,
Yeah.
and they haven't been a problem. I think a generator would also not be a problem as long as you can get the clearance from the neighbor's driveway.
You can get the clearance from all sides, yeah.
Mhm.
I just,
Ms.
that was
Chairman?
that was my big
I'm gonna have to
issue.
get used to saying that.
Yes.
I think the discussion was, air conditioners, they run, and I don't know what percent, most of the homes in Berkeley, like you said, have air conditioners. And when air conditioners are running, other air conditioners are running and windows are closed. When a generator's running, the ambient level of noise is dead silence. And I think that, we talked about that a little bit. It's not apples and apples. There's a lot of air conditioners running at the same time, but when the power's out, not many people have generators, and you can hear them.
Well, you're
Blocks away.
assuming that a power outage occurs only in the summertime when windows are open?
You're right, you're right. But it does occur in the summertime when windows are open.
They're quiet.
And the ambient level of noise is much lower, and windows are open. So I think and I think we discussed this before, I think there's a little bit of a difference. regarding a generator and an air conditioner. So
At
I
the,
just want to bring that up, because I do think we discussed that in the past.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Smith?
at a zoning board of appeals meeting in which we discussed side yard installations for standby generators, one of the applicant's neighbors made a statement that I thought was pretty neat. He said his neighbor with the generator let him plug in an extension cord. And when that happens, I think any concern about ambient noise just disappears. So, you know, with good neighbors and you know, caring about the community, I have not been able to convince myself that there's a problem putting standby generators in side yards.
And we do have a decibel limit on this. Do we have any other comment? Mr. Richardson?
Yeah, I do. At the bottom of the second page and extending the third page, that, that particular paragraph addresses decibel levels. And I recall that the 65 dB at 15 feet is seems to be a customary industry standard. And that 65 decibels is a conversational level of noise. So that seems to me to be reasonable. The second sentence, additional sound abatement measures may be reached with the installation of landscaping, landscape treatment, or fencing, see fence ordinance. I'm just a little bit lost by that. I don't know what we're driving at there. If this decibel level is acceptable, under what circumstances would additional measures be needed?
Chair?
Yes.
I think in our previous discussion, we talked about there are instances in some communities that they require screening around the generator if it's in the side yard.
So it doesn't have anything to do with noise?
Well, no, so that
Oh.
you can't see it, you know, screen it from
Yeah,
your neighbors,
yeah.
screen it from the front yard, and that does help cut down noise. Just like putting up a privacy fence will help you in some ways cut down noise. So if you landscape around it, if you have the room, my concern still, I still have a lot of concerns about side yards, and as I've mentioned before, I have a neighbor who has a air conditioner in the side yard, and of course, that runs almost all summer long. I think there's some allergies in the house, and that's why they use it, like even on a nice day like today where it didn't get really, really hot, that air conditioning is still going. So I listen to it all the time when I open my windows. So I still have concerns about even air conditioners in the side yard, so.
Madam Chair? I had one question. There's a sentence and a couple of comments too. On the last page that says if manufacturer's specifications are more stringent, those specifications shall, and then it kind of cuts
Drops
off. I wasn't sure what that was in reference to, if we should just take that out.
I think we should take that out because we're either going to set a standard for the unit or we're not, and they're going to have to pick a unit that meets our standards, so if it's,
greater.
yeah, or, you know, or exceeds our standards, so I agree with removing that line.
That might be that they're saying, maybe the plan was those specifications shall be greater than
What our
what
requirements
our
would be.
requirements
Yeah.
are.
They'll control over ours
Equal
if they're
to or-
greater.
Yeah,
Maybe
but that's
lower
fine, if you want to
dBs.
buy a more efficient unit or a quieter unit, that's up to you,
Exceeds.
but there's going to be a minimum standard that we're
Minimum
going to accept, I would imagine.
And then a couple comments.
Sure.
As far as the exterior appliances in the side yard, I personally don't have an issue with it. My neighbor too runs their air conditioner all year long, or all summer long, and we have our windows open all the time, and it doesn't bother me personally. So I don't have an issue with the exterior appliances in the side yard. I think it's good that we're addressing all of them at once as opposed to just addressing the generators. As I understand it now, we've been allowing the air conditioners, but with no codification of that requirement, so it's good to see that's being addressed. That's all I have.
Ms. Chairperson?
Yes.
Mr. Dean Smith, you're on the Zoning Board of Appeals. How often has this come before you folks? Something like this, whether it's a air conditioner or a generator's rather a new phenomena, but
Well, with air conditioners, we don't get them customarily at the Zoning Board of Appeals. I
don't
think
get any?
the
You
way
don't
the
get any?
city, the way the city works air conditioners
Okay.
is if somebody wants to put one in their side yard, they need to get a letter from their neighbor saying it's okay. And then once the installation is there, they're grandfathered and they can replace the unit, which is something that somewhere down the road I'd like to have that discussion because I believe exterior appliances belong behind the buildings. But if a neighbor is okay with an exterior appliance or a standby generator next to in a side yard, I can't come up with a good reason not to allow it. But the direct answer to your question, we had 2 applicants, one of whom had already installed a generator, and one of their neighbors, for lack of a better term, ratted them out. And, you know, they came and did an application. They had another neighbor, the guy living right next door, very amicable. There's no issue, no anger about noise or whatnot. And then we had another person who had not installed one yet, but because of the power outage we had earlier this year when we had the big wind, they wanted to put in a standby unit, and the only place they could put it was in the side yard between their house and their neighbor's house.
And why was that?
The house is on a narrow lot. They had just kind of a strange setup, and the neighbor had an air conditioning condenser in his side lot. They had air conditioning condenser in the side lot. The only place they could put it was towards the front of the building rather than towards the rear, but behind a fence. We granted the application for the variance just because there was no good reason not to.
Okay, I understand that. I have an issue. I think they should be in the backyard. That's just my feeling. And we have statements in here, if they're installed correctly and things like that. Well, a lot of things are installed correctly, air conditioning units and generators, and they hum along for a while. But after X number of years, they start sounding like a circular saw or something, and everybody's happy in the beginning, but as they get louder and louder, that can become an irritant to somebody, and it makes for bad neighbors instead of good neighbors. I mean, a lot of people have good intentions, but it doesn't always last. And what we're promoting here is something that's a permanent item that will start out fine, but over time may not be well maintained, and at that point it's too bad for the neighbor who has to sit there and endure it.
In our area, a standby generator would probably run less than 48 hours a year.
I understand that. I'm even talking about the air conditioners.
Okay.
So
All outdoor appliances.
Yeah.
Ms. Shea.
Madam Chair, maybe I'm a little confused. It's my understanding that the current ordinance, which covers air conditioning condensers, eliminates the option of putting it in the side yard altogether unless you have the permission of a neighbor.
Right.
Why don't I see that written here?
Yeah,
If this is the current ordinance, that's not the way I read
You
this.
effectively do. If you look
Okay.
at the middle of the second page,
Okay.
if you can put in an air conditioning unit and have it 3 feet off your lot line,
Mm-hmm.
you're not 5 feet from the lot line.
Okay.
So in most cases, person's still going to have to come back and get a variance unless they have maybe a 10-foot setback or a little bit bigger than the standard 40-foot Berkley lot.
So therein, I guess, lies, if it's working well for the air conditioning units, why would the same logic not apply to a similar unit? Wherein, I mean, if this is what we've been going by for years, that basically eliminates the option of putting it in your side yard, then why would that not apply to a generator?
I think there are some wider lots in the city in some areas, as well as corner lots. So this comes up as a concern, that they're putting them in the side lots versus in the backyard, because the backyard then can be you know, enjoyed more patio, deck, whatever, and it kind of puts it out of sight, out of mind. I'd like to see this address that it covers not only installations, but portable units,
Oh, boy.
portable generators.
Starting to get into a police powers
We're
question there.
not, no, those are loud, particularly a small, you know, if
They are.
if you go borrow one from your neighbor whose power is still working, those can be very problematic in your side yard or wherever you're gonna put that, and it's gonna run till it runs out of gas or
I can
diesel.
attest, mine is very loud, my portable.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I think our attorney should research whether we have the
Sure.
jurisdiction over portable units. I'm not convinced that we do.
Yeah, and.
It's an outdoor appliance.
Well, it's temporary, though.
Temporary. This
Sheen.
isn't a permanent one. This has,
Temporary.
they usually run them to test them
Sure.
weekly, where a portable
Sure.
one, you're not doing that.
Sure.
Couple of other comments.
Sure, Stuart.
I think the colloquy between Mr. and Mr. Smith made me wonder just if there's a compelling public necessity here for this ordinance. I mean, it seems to me we should enact something or recommend it be enacted only if there's a demonstrated need to liberalize the the placement of these devices. And if there is, I mean, I'm certainly willing to consider. But if there is, if these are unusual circumstances, perhaps we can just rely on the variance procedure of the ZBA. And I'm just wondering about that aspect of this. The other thing, real quick, getting back to my original comment, if we're going to do something with this ordinance, I think we do have to do something with that second sentence, because where it talks about landscaping, because that sentence doesn't do anything. It just makes an observation. I mean, if you're going to require landscaping, say you're requiring it.
Well, I think part of what this is for is if the unit they've installed is going to be higher than the 65 dB, they have this as an option to lower that dB level.
Then it should spell it out.
Yeah, I agree
Okay.
with that.
Yeah,
That
it's-
language can be
It
changed.
needs to be a shall
Yeah.
requirement.
Yeah.
Madam
Additional
Chair?
Sound abatement measures shall be, yes, Mr.
So anyway, I don't know about the need for this, I
Well,
guess.
let me respond to Commissioner Richardson's comment. The reason we're looking at this ordinance is right now the city does not have a mechanism to permit somebody to install a standby generator. So we need to update the ordinance to allow this to happen. And standby generators, you know, we talk about getting older. And one of the things that as people age, they may have medical equipment and things that require them to have more reliable power than the already quite reliable
Right.
power we've got.
I'm with
So the idea was to have an ordinance that allows somebody to get a permit to install a standby generator without having to go through the zoning board of appeals.
A permit to do it on a side yard.
No, a permit to do it anywhere.
Yeah.
You have to have a permit anyway.
We don't have a mechanism to allow somebody to put in a standby generator.
Okay,
A
well,
side yard setback,
all right.
the way this is written is kind of nice because it doesn't allow, say, somebody on a 40-foot lot to put one of these in their side yard unless they have an incredibly narrow house. So they're still going to be coming to the zoning board of appeals for location issues. But if you're in an area where you have a big lot, or maybe you're on a lot and a half, then not a problem. But there was another issue that I got off track.
Fencing.
What was that? Oh, fencing.
Fencing.
This whole thing about the sound attenuation is, if a unit is 65 decibels, it should be fine. But one of the things that I would like to see is that if you've got one in the side yard, There should be some kind of screening so you don't see it from the street.
Okay,
You know,
I
whether
get
that's
that.
a shrub towards the front of the house or whatnot. But it's more of a aesthetic than a audio issue.
And would that apply to just the generators, or you're thinking to all the exterior appliances?
I would prefer all exterior appliances. It looks nicer.
I think we can
Ms.
do that.
Ms. Chairman, I'd like to ask
Yes.
the city manager a question. When it comes time to a dispute, as was brought up, you know, they start out nice and quiet, and things happen. And it could be an air conditioning unit, it could be a generator. Is the city brought into this to resolve it? Do they have do they bring in their sonic meter and
Right.
their decibel meter? And, because eventually we're gonna have a dispute. Hey, it was 65 decibels when you put it in, but now it's 2 years later, it's
Right.
90 decibels.
Yeah,
And
we would be
now
the-
there, as I mentioned, excuse me, but now as I mentioned, you know, all of a sudden they're not good neighbors, there's a dispute that the person that is being aggrieved or whatever, that's not the right word, but the complainant.
Burdened.
Burden's a good word. Complainant will go to the city and say, hey, my neighbor has something that's just driving us nuts, keeping us awake. Do we have a mechanism? Do we have the equipment? Do we have the code enforcement people to deal with that?
That is exactly how we would handle that. We would come out with a decibel meter, take a reading, and then decide from there how to proceed. But if it is over 65, we would address it with the property owner to say either it needs some sort of repair, a replacement, or it needs to be kept from running until that issue is remedied. So,
Okay.
yes.
Like any other dispute between neighbors.
Right.
Okay.
Any more comments?
I do.
You do, Mr. Mayor.
I have a question for Commissioner Dean Smith, because I know you've worked in this industry. What's the minimum requirement of distance from a building for a generator?
The minimum requirement, I couldn't quote that. I just remember there's a rule about operable windows.
Right,
and I
yeah,
think
I
yours
know
is
there's
5 or 6 feet.
Operable windows.
They're supposed to be a couple feet away from the building. You want to have some clearance, but I couldn't pull a number
I
out.
know in previous discussions, you mentioned the perfect location for one of these really is like next to your garage or.
Oh, ideally, yeah, or even in the garage.
I had them out looking at my house to see about putting a generator in. And they wanted it would have to go off our all seasons room, and it would have to be, they wanted to set it at 4 feet. I was going to have to extend the terrace out 8 feet because they wanted 4 feet for that, 4 feet for the generator, and then they wanted to be able to walk around the generator in order to service it. Yeah. And I watched the ka-choom go and put an end to it.
That's where the portable generator comes in.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, you know, the only way I'd be agreeable to allowing anything in the side yard if it's screened in some way, especially from the street and maybe even from your neighbor.
I'd like to address the screening as well. I think that it's fine to suggest that you get a written letter from your neighbor, but neighbors change, and, you know, it may be that you love that house, and then you realize that the other neighbor, what could be, who knows, what vegetation you have, you didn't peek over the fence into the neighbor's yard, and then all of a sudden, you open your window, and so I think there should be some kind of screening on that to keep it, you know, out of the view. It's a simple thing. If it's going to go in a side yard, there are so few places in Berkeley where it could go in a side yard, so that's a small burden to place on them.
Yeah, I worry about, you know, ugly things in the side yards. I've got a 19-year-old car that's pretty rusty and ugly, and I can't screen it.
Madam Chair, a question for the commission. If we are going to proceed with a side yard setback conversation, should there be an alteration to the 15 feet from the source as far as where we take the measurement? If we're in an area where the next property line over is less than 15 feet, should it be
Yes.
addressed in text?
Yes, I think we're going to have to address that in the
Madam
text as
Chair?
well.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd be very careful about that. The manufacturers, they have their
Standard. yeah.
standards and their testing and certifications. And if we start saying, well, in this installation, it's got to be measured at 6 feet, and will create a rat nest of regulation that will be a total failure.
I think we can merely state that screening would be required in the side yard. That probably would dampen it. Plenty, a certain height of screening would contain it. I mean, I think there are industry standards for the noise anyways on these.
So, Ms. Chairman,
Unless they're buying an old used one. Go ahead.
so the 15-foot from the source measuring, that negates 50-80% of the sites in Berkeley.
No, that's just in the manufacturer specs.
I understand.
They'll tell you what the noise is.
But they can
But-
measure their noise like it's say it's in the side yard by the front of the house, screened.
Yeah, but there's a lot of homes.
They could do 15 feet back from that.
But there's a lot of homes that are less than 15 feet
Oh, I understand that.
from something that's in the side yard of their neighbor's house.
Right.
So there's no way to measure that to the wall of the house.
No,
other
we
than the
don't do
distance
that
of the
now
wall.
with residential air conditioning
Exactly.
units.
Okay,
A pump is a pump.
Right.
I understand.
And if you're close to it, it's noisier than if you're far away.
Absolutely.
If the house is sided, it's not as noisy as a brick house, banging between. So I want to be real careful about how we set a regulation that we can't possibly enforce.
And that's some of it too, that noise bouncing between the homes.
Do we have any more comments from the planning commission before I open it up to the residents?
I'd
I'll
like to
just-
actually hear from the residents.
All right.
Yeah, I'll note before that when the air was running, we had about an average level of 75 decibels for ambient noise in the room, and since the air turned off, it's been about 62, 63, according to my decimal meter.
Good to know. I
It's a
always thought that
really
was
smart
loud.
phone.
All right. Please state your name and your address, please.
Thank you. Kurt Height, 3525 Robina. I wanted to make sure, because to me, it sounds like you're going to do size setbacks different than how you regulate the air conditioner units, or are you changing it for everything? Like, right now, if somebody gets a letter from their neighbor to install an AC unit on the side of the house, and they don't have 3 feet,
We're using the same thing that's currently in the code.
okay, so they're gonna allow them to, so if somebody wants to do if somebody can't put it on the back of their house, which, don't get me wrong, if I ever put a standby generator, it's going in the back, I got a perfect spot for it, but, so this doesn't apply to me, I'm just saying, if somebody wants to do a standby generator and they can only put it on the side, if they get a waiver from their neighbor, it's gonna apply the same way as if they get a waiver like a AC unit, right?
Yeah, so this ordinance is for all outdoor appliances.
I just wanted to make sure that, I was worried that it sounded like you were going to weigh them differently, and I just wanted to be sure. Now, as far as Martin Smith's comment on the ambient level and when the power is out, I'm going to tell you what, if you went down the street during your last power outage, you heard neighbor 1, neighbor 2, neighbor 3, skip neighbor 4 because he was out of town, neighbor 5, neighbor 6, all had portable generators. They were loud. And the last neighbor on the block, which I happen to live on the block with the gentleman that has the standby generator already installed, you didn't hear his generator. It was so quiet you couldn't hear his, because on the other side of his house you have Comcast on the telephone pole has their portable generators that as soon as the power goes out they come and put on every telephone pole. So yes, if it was at a time where maybe if it was cool weather or if there were more people with power, maybe the noise level would go down, but there were so many people with portable generators that you could make the case to say that it was actually louder than it normally is, because the generators you could hear from 3 houses away. I mean, the portable generators are really loud, but the standby one, you couldn't hear it when you were at his front door talking to him. It was that quiet. I'm going to tell you, it was a big difference. So I just wanted to make sure we were clear that, I mean, you can hear an AC unit. You hear it when it kicks on, but the standby generator is just a purr. I mean, it starts up and it goes, and then when the power comes back, it's off. It's really, I think it's better that we make it more consistent, so it's easier. And I was just worried because I was hearing people saying if they have larger yards that they wouldn't have a problem to sell them on the side. And to me, I'm thinking that just kind of creates well, I live here, and so I don't have to worry about it, whereas you live over there and you can't do anything about it. I didn't want to hear that. But that being said, talking about Comcast, is there anything you guys can do to regulate that then? Because they just pop up and throw their regulators or their generators right up to the telephone pole, and they're loud.
and they know that it's not like it's not a house. But then, you know, back when shopping center was open, they used to pull a big truck up, and 24/7, if the power was out for 8 days, they had the generator there for 8 days, and your house rattled, and you could hear it at the end of the block. It was that loud, and maybe I was a good neighbor. I never called and complained on them. I figured, well, they got to keep their food good. But I'm going to tell you what, I would be more concerned about that than the standby generators, because they're real quiet.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Height, one thing to keep in mind is when we're talking about portable generators in side yards,
Yeah.
right now, the box for a portable generator is still pretty large.
You mean a standby generator?
Yes, a standby generator. So the thought that a standby generator may fit in our neighborhoods where we've got the 40-foot lots, in a side yard where there's a house, a driveway, and a little 5-foot green belt, you won't find a standby generator installed in one of those. Right now, the box is just too big.
I thought the box, the house we're talking about, I think it was smaller than their actual AC unit.
Go measure it
From the
again.
front of it. I mean,
It's good size. I think it's 30 inches by 36 or 42.
Yeah,
But
they're
they're
fairly large.
typically, they're too big.
I thought he had the specifications when he was here, and I thought that was actually a discussion.
They're
because
typically too big to fit in that 5-foot strip
So you're
without
saying they're
creating
not
a
going to be
hazard.
regulated the same? You're saying they won't fit
Yeah.
there, so they won't, so that even if they get a waiver,
No, where I expect to see them is in the areas where you've got house all green, and then another house, like say in the area where the driveways flip, and you've got 10 feet between the two houses. But right now, I don't envision seeing one where there's a driveway and a 5-foot strip.
so even if you see an AC unit there?
AC units are smaller.
Okay, so if we measured it, or if they had ones
If
that
it
were
fits,
similar
it
size?
fits. But
Well, I
that's-
don't know that they fit by those specifications. I've never gone to measure an AC unit. It just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of room
Well,
between the
that's-
side of the house and the
I don't want
driveway.
to be having anybody making up facts here. We have a
Yeah, I
set,
don't know that they fit. I don't.
we have a setback that you've got to be 3 feet off the property line. If you've only got 5 feet of house, and you've got a minimum of, 1 to 2 feet off a building, it's not going to fit. So,
So right now, what I'm saying is the AC units, right now, if they get a waiver from their neighbor, it still has got to fit, and you're saying it does?
AC
Based on the
unit can be
size?
put close to a house.
Small.
Put closer to the house, okay.
So
So
there's a
there is some
difference.
differences, because the AC unit doesn't have to be so far away.
Right, so don't be expecting to see a whole lot of standby generators.
Well,
in
the cost is
side
prohibitive,
yards.
but as Mr. Richard talked about, he's not sure how many people would want it, but I think you're probably find about the same number of people want a standby generator, or maybe more than want the backyard chicken, so it's probably close anyway, so.
More than the chickens.
Are there any more comments from the public? Okay. So, I think, Mr. Baumgarten, did you capture all the comments adequately on the ordinance? I think we'd need to take another look at this.
Yes, and I'll bring back to this commission another draft, hopefully inclusive of all the information presented here this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Also note a typo at the bottom of page 2. It says measures when it should say measured.
Measured.
Oh, yes, measured.
Oh, okay, measures.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. So, we are on to liaison reports. Let's start with the Chamber of Commerce.
I did attend the chamber meeting in July, and the big thing they were preparing for at that time was the Art Fest, the Street Art Fest, and I was able actually to attend that. And it was interesting. Initially, I told them it was hard to find where they were, and they were all down north of Catalpa off of Coolidge. But I think it was, for the first year, it was pretty well attended, and they said they probably were not going to be making any money on it this year, but they were hopeful that it's going to continue to grow, and I think, people have seen some of the murals that have gone up in the city. Some are better than others, but it's nice to see the change. They talked about membership. Membership's at 153 members currently. And the pub crawl is scheduled for August 24th, starting at Amici's, I think it is. It's $20 in advance, $30 if you walk in. There was questions as to whether Berkley Commons was going to be able to join. They want to. It's all a matter of if they're open in time. And they've decided that some of the profits from the pub crawl is going to be donated to the Berkley Holiday Lights Parade. So that's a good use of that money. And then the next thing they're working on is the County Oakland Irish Festival, which is September 9th. And they're also looking at ways to get more people into downtown during the Dream Cruise itself. That Saturday, they're thinking of maybe trying to run a shuttle of some sort and get people to park somewhere in the city and then shuttle them down. So that was it.
Okay, thank you. City Council?
City Council, I attended the meeting of this on Monday, July the 17th, the City Council. They spent a good deal of time discussing the Irish Festival that will be coming to the city, and it will be on Saturday, September the 9th, and running through Sunday, September the 10th. It'll be on 12 Mile Road. There'll be some closures of the streets around it, and they purchased temporary traffic signal lights for emergency vehicles, emergency sections, and where roads need to be closed, and they're going to buy their own. They purchased a couple vehicles, and anything else that was of any interest, pretty much that was at I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I think I covered it fairly well.
And we don't have a downtown, and I did not make the Parks and Rec Board. So, do we have any other liaison reports or?
Environmental.
Environmental. Mr. Richardson.
Yes, the Environmental Advisory Committee did meet. We spent most of our meeting discussing the possibility of developing a sustainability plan for the city of Berkeley.
The city has one.
Well, this would be, without going into detail, this would be playing on that work that's already been done. So we agreed to explore this idea with the city administration, and also to develop our idea by supporting it with a little more concrete information than we have right now. And I'm anticipating we'll have something to actually present to the city administration by September.
Awesome.
Also, I've been made aware of some changes in the legal and grant picture that could make it easier for residential homeowners to install solar energy cells at their homes. And I've been tasked with following up with the Southeast Regional Energy Office to get the details on that, and if it seems like something that worthy of being shared with the citizens, we would prepare a report and present that through the administrative channels. That's my report.
Okay. We have some correspondence in our packets tonight. We have the Planning Commission's annual report that was prepared as of June 30th. That takes us from July 2016 through July 2017. It details the approved site plans, or site plan reviews and the PUDs and rezonings. So that's available on request at the city office if anybody would like to see that. We have an article called Managing Neighborhood Change, a framework for sustainable and equitable revitalization, prepared by the National Housing Institute with support from the Surdna Foundation, which was an interesting read. And we have from the New Urban Network, the architectural maturation of Portland food carts, about the city of Portland, Oregon's food cart culture, which I can remember 10, 15 years ago going and, hitting those and thinking those were fun. So some food for thought as we move forward. We also had a few letters in support and opposition of the discussed La Salette project. But we hope that those get put into the record as once that comes forward back on the agenda.
Sure.
So, any other last comments? We'll go around the room. We'll start with Dean Smith.
Oh, thank you. Let's see. By way of ZBA liaison report,
Oh, I'm sorry,
I have nothing
ZBA.
to report for July. A couple comments. One, with the change in leadership here. I'm pleased that you've accepted the role. I'm even happier that Dave Barnett is going to continue on as vice chair. We've had, we lost our city planner. We have a new but very, very competent city manager. But the continuity, we've had, about the last 20 years, Berkeley's seen some pretty dramatic change, and there's going to be more coming up. So to have some new young energy and some continuity with the background, the history is pretty important. So I'm just pleased as punch about that. I want to thank former Chairperson Barnett for his years of service. He's been a pretty darn good Planning Commission boss and an advocate for Berkeley. To go back farther than any of us. A comment I need to make, and it has to do with citizen speakers and arguing, responding. We will have citizen speakers come up and talk. And our directive is to not engage those speakers. There are times the speaker is 100% incorrect in what they're saying. It's difficult to not react. It's difficult to not offer a correction. So sometimes you'll see certain commissioners squirming as a speaker is sharing their thoughts and opinions, which they do have the right to do. But we don't have a mechanism for timely correction. It allows misstatements to, maybe take some weight that they don't deserve. As it relates to the proposed La Salette planned unit development, it's a proposal. There's nothing that's been agreed to. There's been nothing that's come from the Planning Commission that has approved or even agreed to any part of that proposal. So we've got a speaker up here saying, well, you did this, you did this, you did this. That annoys me because that person is just passing along bad information. We need to stick to the facts, and we need to be professional and courteous to each other. Last thing, Sunday in the Free Press, there was a nice article, and I cut it out, and then I promptly lost it. But it was about managing change. What's happened in some of the neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. Mm-hmm. Some have stayed strong, others have declined. It was a very well-written article and not directly applicable to Berkeley, but certainly overall applicable to transition in the communities. Berkeley has remained a city that people want to live in. Pretty much every block, there's people that are making big investments in their homes. That's a big bet on Berkeley, and it's something that you guys should all be proud of. I'm beeping. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Tangeri?
Nothing much to add. Thank you, Dave, for your
Thank you.
time as chair.
Pam?
I do absolutely appreciate the time, much of which goes unseen. And so I certainly respect your decision today and appreciate the time that you've put in. And likewise, appreciate the time that everyone else up here puts in that goes unseen. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to be able to take on additional time constraints in my schedule. So I even more so appreciate the time that you all put in on the various committees and whatnot. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Burnett?
I just want to congratulate you, Michelle, and I'm here if you need me.
Thank God.
So I have nothing else this evening.
Mr. Murad?
I kind of echo some of Commissioner Smith's comments. It's sometimes very difficult when you're out there saying something to us that we want to respond, but we can't. We're not supposed to. And I think in an item discussion, we can talk about what people have suggested, or even now is a good time to address it. Mr. Cox talked about people recusing themselves from the La Salette property, because I'm a former parishioner. I haven't been in the La Salette parish probably 15 years. I don't see even my being a former parishioner there having any impact on how I will vote on that item. I don't feel I have a conflict of interest. And really, Matt, I don't know, how is that handled?
The general standard of practice is you would declare a possible conflict of interest to the commission. The commission would then decide if it is appropriate to recuse yourself. The standard rule of thumb that's typically utilized is if you have an interest in the decision, whether it be financial or otherwise.
Okay. All right, and I don't feel I have anything that, whether it goes forward or not, I don't feel I have any conflict there. So I just wanted to let you know that, and I want to do the right thing, but I don't feel that it's going to help me one way or the other. I'm interested in making Berkeley the best place to live in Michigan. And that's why I've always, why I've volunteered. I was served on the committee that rebuilt the library. I served on the DDA. I've served on PTAs. I've served on boosters at the high school, and it was always to improve this city. And I don't feel that property, being a former parishioner, is going to impact my decision on that property one way or the other. So I just wanted to state that.
Thank you. Ms. Kapelanski?
I just wanted to echo Commissioner Shadle's comments and thanks to everyone who's volunteering extra time that I also am not able to do right now. And I hope the citizens recognize that everyone is in it just for the betterment of the community.
Mr. Richardson?
Yeah, I think I should address the recusal issue that was raised. I think the record will reflect that my statement at the last meeting was that I didn't feel that my membership in the La Salette Parish would impact my ability to make a fair and objective decision in regards to the application, either the PUD application or the various parking lot applications. I still feel that way. I think the record would also show that what I did say was that if any of my fellow commissioners had any concerns along those lines, I would certainly listen to those concerns and consider them very carefully. What I did not say was that if anybody anywhere had a concern, I would recuse myself. I think if you gave it a moment's thought, you would understand why I could never make such a statement. I simply did not do it and would not do it. But I again, am willing to carefully consider any concerns that any of my fellow commissioners may have in respect to this particular these particular agenda items. And I also want to just congratulate and thank Mr. Barnett for his years of service in I think it's fair to say, thankless job. And Dave, you've always been very courteous to me, very helpful to me. In some ways, I still feel like kind of a newcomer, even though I've been on this commission now longer than I can even realize. But I think collectively we've made a very good decision in appointing Ms. Buckler chair, and I'm certainly available to help you, Michelle, at all, help you, guide you, misguide you, I don't know. But I think you have a lot of support, demonstrated support from your fellow commissioners. I'm sure you'll do a great job. So,
Thank you.
so those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, closing word.
Well, being last, a lot of the stuff has been covered. Congratulations, Ms. Buckler, for ascending to the chairmanship. Careful what you wish for. And Mr. Barnett, you and I have worked closely for probably 10 of the 17 years I've been here, and it is a tough job. And as Ms. Shadle said, there is a lot of time. This is the tip of the iceberg, this meeting, of what is spent monthly, of what the chairperson puts up. And as I said, being a vice chair, it's a pretty easy job. Just have to be on call when you're needed. So you've done a wonderful job, and I wouldn't have nominated you as vice chair if I didn't think it'd be a very good thing to do. Because she's going to need some. You're welcome. She's going to need some assistance, and you have the institutional knowledge, especially with the timing with Amy. Not that Mr. Baumgarten won't shine in his new position, his new temporary position, he hopes. So your institutional knowledge is very important to all of us. I, too, agree with the other Mr. Smith regarding comments. We sit up, I'm one of those fidgety people that sits here and bites his tongue when misstatements are made. And it's very difficult at times, and I'm guilty of as much as anybody here, and maybe more so, of being one who engages the citizens. It's difficult because at citizen comment, we are not allowed to react. And in this position of the commissioner comments, the citizens are not allowed to respond. So there's a missing link there, and it's really unfortunate, but that's the way it works. And maybe there are extraordinary times when we can start a dialogue on something. So anyway, but that's the way it is. I'd like to bring up a couple other things. At our last meeting regarding the La Salette project, there's a comment that came out regarding flooding issues with the Harvard Commons, thank you, the Harvard Commons project. Now, I don't know if there's an issue, I don't know if there's a non-issue, but it was thrown out there. And I mentioned I'd like to see the DPW director or our city engineer. If there is an issue with the design of the underground detention system, we need to know about it, and it needs to be corrected. If there is no issue with it, I'd like to stop hearing about it, because that's one of those things that gets thrown out there, and it's not correct information. And in that regard, I think I also mentioned that if the DPW director and/or the city engineer is here, I'd like them to talk about the regional flooding for the experience we had almost 3 years ago, believe it or not, and indicate what Berkley can do or cannot do about it if and when something like that happens again. I think everybody, the audience who may be here, everybody on TV, and even some of us would like to know. I realize it's a regional thing. It's not a Berkley problem, and that most likely there's not a dang thing we can do about it. But I'd like to hear it from a professional who's involved in that, and let's put that one to bed too. So, congratulations, the two of you. You'll work well together, and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am. May I say something, please?
Well, we
I know
had
it's
our-
I know it's out of order, but
It is out of
It is.
order, unfortunately. We had open citizen comments, and can I ask you to hold your comments till next month, because this is closing comments for the board, and we can certainly take your comments in writing. That's not how I want to kick off, but there are rules of order here, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but
Mr. Smith?
no, this is not the time, sir. I appreciate that. This is not the time. On that challenge, I'd like to say, Mr. Baumgarten, do you have any comments?
Only to say that we are working diligently to not have me sit here next month.
Very good.
For your own sake.
Very good.
I think you do an excellent job.
He just doesn't want to do all the writing, so.
Okay. So, on closing, I want to thank my fellow commissioners for their support for my, let's hope, was a wise decision to accept this post. I enjoy serving the public. I am a natural service provider by heart in my career, and I like being part of any community in which I live, and this one I've been in now for 13 years, and I'm very, very happy to be part of Berkley. And I hope that I do a good job, and of course there's always a feedback mechanism to let me know how I'm doing. Change is painful, but change is constant. So I hope that you are patient with me as I transition. David will use his considerable leg strength to kick me under the table to let me know when I need to do something different. So that's that. So upon that, I will take a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
So moved. And
A second.
a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is closed.